This interview is brought to you in association with Rabobank.
Hello and welcome to another of our Rural Delivery online interviews, where we talk about the issues and events affecting those working in and for New Zealand's primary sector. With me today is Rabobank's Food and Agribusiness Research and Advisory Senior Analyst, Hayley Moynihan. Hayley, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Roger.
Hayley, your Q1 dairy report's just been released, and you've titled it Not Out of the Woods Yet. Can you tell us a little bit about those woods?
Yeah, the woods have been a pretty dark place for global dairy markets over the last 6 to 9 months, where prices have troughed at levels not seen since the wake of the global financial crisis. So that has taken some time to improve and has improved only very modestly at this stage. And while there was a price rally through February, we think that will be reasonably short-lived, and there's still a long, slow grind to recovery to much more sustainable levels, probably towards the end of the year.
Indeed, we saw a dip just very recently in the latest GDT sales.
That's right. I think that was a correction after the rally through February, which was really on the back of dry weather conditions in New Zealand and a temporary slowdown in European milk production growth late last year and early this year, just prior to those production quotas coming off in Europe. The market fundamentals still didn't suggest that there was a more significant price rally coming, and I think that correction was evident in last week's global dairy trade auction.
So a bit of a spike there perhaps as some of those second-tier importers took up the slack that the rest of the market wasn't taking.
That's right, and those second-tier importers are really important to the market, clearing that surplus product and stepping back in when prices come down to more reasonable levels for them to purchase. That's been really important because it means we haven't got inventory sitting around the world waiting to come onto the market when prices improve. Product has generally cleared, and while inventories are moving a little higher in the United States and in Europe, they're certainly nowhere near concerning levels. So those second-tier importers have had a vital role to play.
Very price sensitive, these products, when it gets down to an actual consumer level. So in the UK, where we've seen the dairy companies having a little bit of a war, you've seen consumers respond and demand come up. Other places, flatter. There is a point where people will stop spending. Particularly
in emerging markets who haven't enjoyed the same level of income growth that they have in recent years leading up to 2014 in particular. And those emerging markets are even more price sensitive. Often dairy is still a discretionary item and is often blended with things like vegetable fats in some cases to try and make product a more reasonable price proposition for those local consumers. So that's where market demand tends to switch on and off first.
So a lot of volatility to be considered if you're a Kiwi dairy farmer. What sort of decisions are farmers making?
Yeah, it looks like a cold winter coming through from a cash flow point of view. And we're still 2 months away from dairy companies announcing their opening forecasts for the 15-16 season. So at the moment, farmers are relying on their financiers and other advisors to guide them through that cash flow period for the next 6 months. Cash flows won't really start to improve until we get to October and beyond. So the decisions around levels of feed usage, cow numbers, herd sizes are all being made at the moment with an eye to it still being a tough cash flow period. Some farmers have chosen to stick with their feed and farm system program and not change that on the basis of 1 or 2 years milk price change. But generally we have seen a pullback in supplementary feed usage that is starting to come through in terms of milk production numbers now, and I suspect will still come through early in the next season as well. It does provide somewhat of a silver lining that all costs are examined when milk prices fall to this low level, and I think that will prove to put farmers in good stead for future years in terms of competitiveness and comparative advantage by taking a fairly tough line to costs across the board.
Hayley, just before we go, I'd like to just also pick up on an industry note that you've published with regard to the infant milk formula market in China. And you've made the call that the easy money's been made. I wonder if you could just explain to us why that statement.
Yeah, the Chinese infant milk formula market has grown at a phenomenal rate and one of the most valuable infant milk formula markets in the world. Obviously, high birth rates, or at least high absolute numbers of children being born has driven that, as well as a lot of players in that market, many brands. We see two things happening in the market. One is a much slower rise in the adoption of infant milk formula usage, and the second one is the consolidation of the market from a regulatory point of view. Both of those things will increase competition in the market and are likely to slow down growth rates.
And the birth rate actually isn't climbing at the suggested levels. People thought with the relaxation of the one-child policy that there'd be a surge of new births, but it hasn't played out that way.
No, not exactly as some thought. And a lot of that has to do with the economic realities of living in China. While income growth has been strong in recent years, it is slowing down. The economy is maturing and income growth rates are maturing as well. It's also very common for both parents to be working and certainly for mothers to return to work very quickly for economic reasons. And that means that the prospect of having a second child isn't as straightforward as perhaps we might first think it is.
Some irony in that, given that it's that going out to work that allows you to be able to afford the infant formula in the first place. So obviously there's an interesting sort of socio-economic balance going on there. Yeah,
certainly a real catch-22, particularly when it's often the grandparents bringing up the child or at least within the same household. So it isn't straightforward, and I think those social and economic factors come into play much more than just the permission or ability to have a second child.
Anything in that new regulatory environment that's going to challenge the role of the importer? I note that you make an interesting statement that this milk formula has become almost an issue of national esteem within China.
It has, because infant milk formula has had its issues in terms of food safety and supply chain security, and therefore it is important that not just for the health of children, of course, but important that the regulatory framework works really well. And from that point of view, regulations have encouraged more vertical integration of the supply chain. Companies must demonstrate control over raw material supply, not just from a price perspective, but from a physical supply security perspective. And that is encouraging more joint ventures and collaborations and contracts between branded retail-facing companies and those supplying ingredients into the sector, whether they be domestic or international.
This interview was brought to you in association with Rabobank.